And welcome back to We Are the People. This is your host, Jason and Alexia Preston. Coming from a undisclosed location. Sometimes we just got to get the heck out of Dodge, especially after a week like last week. As many of you know, we were deposed for the lawsuit we're dealing with regarding the Hamblin girls' victim statements that was covered by Fox 13. And Sheriff Mike Smith came out and talked about what they did in court that involved David Levitt as well. It was also where the Homeland Security was involved, and the same set of testimonies where David Hamblin admitted on the phone to raping his daughter. We covered that show in our first Shadows of Power series. It was the first video we did on this topic. And we were threatened with a lawsuit by one of the people that the girls named in their victim statements. And that was back, beginning January of 2024?
We filmed that in September of 2023.
But the lawsuit.
Yes.
Lawsuit came, the threat, the demand letter came in January.
Of 2025.
Of 2025. And it was, we refused to take it down because we believe that these voices need to be heard. We believe that the people need to be aware. We believe if this is happening, that this is a public issue. Fox 13 covered it, so we believed it needed to be covered. And so we kept it up. And anyways, bottom line is we were deposed in that, which was grueling, most of the day being peppered with questions trying to trap us. I just want to thank those of you who, prayed and fasted for us, for your support. Also, another big thing that happened last week is the Twins show was removed. We had out of nowhere just disappeared. And we've been years working with YouTube. I've never seen YouTube ever come out and just remove a show without any conversation. Usually they give us a warning and give us a chance to appeal it or edit certain things. But with the Twins video, it was clearly, in my opinion, took a lot of power, someone pretty high up to be able to pull those strings. I don't believe the Petersons were capable of doing that. But that video still is out there on Rumble, and we're going to release another update on that show specifically later because I think it deserves it. But Alexia, what are we talking about today?
Sure, this is actually a show that we filmed over a year ago. It has to do with the Tom Stallings case. We had Tom Stallings on, I believe it was last January, February of last year, just as we were digging deeper into some of the active and past cases involving SRA and related ritual abuse. And this one was one that really stuck with us, especially because it was one that seemingly got some justice. There are a lot of components of this that we find to be patterns of what we're seeing systemically. And it was a very eye-opening conversation with Tom Stallings going into the Michael Jensen case. It's recently resurfaced as videos of testimony meeting has been circulating online. And we're fortunate enough to have with us today Brett Henry, who was responsible for some of those videos getting shared online. So would love to get his perspective on the case, especially just becoming familiar with it himself.
So we're going to play that video here in just a second and then bring Brett Henry in again. He's been on here multiple times with us. But before, please go to our website, wearethepeople.org, and sign up for the newsletter. We cannot re-put the Twins video back up or our channel will get completely taken down. So obviously, we are kind of shaking things right now. And if you value the content, we will email every show out, usually the Friday after it's released. So please make sure you're subscribed there. And with that being said, let's go. Should we play the video?
Yes, absolutely.
And I am here today because it's my job to warn you. There are many new people who don't know what's happened. And you have people that have enabled and protected a pedophile.
I think this is not the place to talk about it. I'd be happy to talk to you after. This is a testimony meeting where we have reserved to provide testimony. Okay. Actually, you're not.
Your children are not safe.
I'd be happy to
They hid a pedophile from the police along with Stephen when he was sent home from his mission.
That is not.
It is in the facts.
No.
You can check the transcripts from court.
I would be.
I believe in my Christ too. Please know that your children are not safe.
Your church
attacked and protected a pedophile. He abused my children with the knowledge. Your members housed him in the meeting house, housed him, and then put him in the home of a family member who did not know that he had already assaulted children in Utah. He ended up going to other people's homes and molested over 42 children in 8 years. Those are the children that we know of as of now. We are trying to warn you so that you can protect your children. We want your children to be safe. We want you to believe that you know what your children say are true. It is extremely important that you listen to your children. When they tell you that somebody has hurt them, you need to go to the police. This church hid Michael Jensen from the police. When he came back, it's in the files, it's in the facts, it's in church documents, and it's proof.
We understand what's going on. You made your point.
To have a millstone around my neck. That is assault. That is assault.
All right, and now we have Brett Henry joining us remotely, the bearded realtor himself. Brett, welcome to the show.
How are we doing,
Thanks
Brett?
for having me on again. I'm doing really well. How are you guys?
Good. You know, it was very interesting when I saw that video you posted, because I was like, as soon as, I mean, it didn't take long for us to recognize what it was about. And I just felt so bad for all the people in the comments because they had no idea what the background was. And you had so many people debating and fighting. And so I was like, well, this is something people need to understand. But Brett, tell us first off, why'd you post it? And what's been the response? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I had no context to this either. And I guess being born and raised LDS, like I'm no longer a member of the church, but being born and raised, when I saw this video come up and I saw these women burying their testimony about their kids being abused, it was like an instant red flag to me. Like, if these women are willing to get up and fast in testimony meeting and say this over the pulpit, like something really, really bad has happened and they're not getting help. And this is like a last resort. When I saw this, I was like, this is a last resort. And so, and I guess like just understanding more now fully the amount of abuse that does go on in the church and how it happens. I mean, my wife was primary president for 3 years before we left the church. And we saw abuse get covered up and swept under the rug. And when I saw this, I'm just like, these moms are crying out for help because nobody else is helping them and nobody else is listening. And I had no other context other than that until after you text me. And then I was like, there's so much more to this story. And that's what I was kind of getting in the comments too, is I guess I had kind of two different groups of people. I had people who were non-members who weren't familiar with the LDS church. And they just could not believe that, like, this mom's talking about abuse and the congregation starts singing over them, tells them to get down, sit down, and stop talking. And I guess, Jason, me and you kind of talked about this off the screen, but it's like, I can understand being born and raised in the church, how like this is not appropriate in a church setting to get up in the pulpit on Fast Sunday and talk about abuse. And so, but people outside of the religion could not understand. They're just like, why did they start singing over the top of her, I believe in Christ, when this mom's talking about her kids being abused? And being outside of the church, I understand it now, but I understand it from being inside as well. So that was one group of people who were just non-members and they just didn't understand. They're just like, how are these people trying to shut her up when she's talking about her kids being abused? And it wasn't just one mom, it was two. And then we have the other group of people who are members of the church. And this was the hard part for me is out of this group of members of the church commenting, I had two very different sides. 95% of the people who were supporting this woman doing this were women in my comments. And then 95% of the people who were talking down about this woman, saying this is not the time or the place, and saying awful, awful things in the comments were LDS men. And it just, I guess it made me really sad and made me realize, like, in the church, there is a church hierarchy structure, and men are taught not to question that. And I think, you can kind of elaborate on that as far as the case goes, but that's what I was seeing is like the men were telling these women, you should not be speaking out against this, about this abuse in sacrament meeting. And the women were the ones standing up and saying, no, this needs to happen.
Yeah. So we're going to invite all of you to, continue through the show. I think you are going to have a lot of compassion for these women. After you understand the background, after you understand the horrific things they've been through. And yes, like he said, one of the things, it will come up from Tom Stallings, who was basically the gentleman who exposed all of this. He was an incredible man who basically found out this serial predator was in their midst and just racking up the body count of kids. And one of the things that he talked about is how it was often the mothers who were wanting to go and report it, and often the fathers saying, no, we're not going to report this. No, let it be, let it be, let it be. We don't need to go to the police. And I just was so shocked because I'm like, wow, isn't that the role of like the sheepdog, like the masculine to protect? And here we have this culture of men who is like, even the kids' very fathers who were being abused by Michael Jensen were saying, hey, let's not report this to the police. So this is a crazy story. And there's a lot to it. Alexa, anything you want to share about it? Because it came out last spring on our channel, and then some things happened afterwards.
Yeah, it was actually quite a coincidence. Right after the show was released, I believe it was early spring. It was the same week there was a 2025 ruling, where the church had actually sued its insurers to get some of this money back from the 2018 settlement with some of the families in West Virginia. So there was a $32 million payout settlement to the victims' families. In addition to this, there was $27 million spent in legal fees. Now, we're not going to make any assumptions here about where this money is coming from, but we're talking about close to $60 million that was paid out by the church to cover up this, with one convicted ritualized abuse that was going on in West Virginia and coming back to the state of Utah. So what I think is very unusual about the timing of this all is that the church actually lost their case against their insurers. So the federal judge actually ruled that the church was fully responsible for this payment. Now it's sitting still with the appeals court, but you can assess basically who's in the wrong and who should be paying for this one child predator. To dish out $60 million is an absurd amount of money.
Yeah, this is a heartbreaking story, and and people sometimes say, Jason, why are you focusing on the LDS Church? Well, simple. If I was Catholic and I lived in Italy, I can promise you I'd be focusing on the Catholic Church. We have a responsibility to fight where we stand, to make a difference where we can. If there is evil in my neighborhood, I have a God-given responsibility to do something about it. If I see evil within my church, I would be held accountable for being silent. It's not about picking at a church or our church. It's about if we are aware, if these things are happening in our backyard, in our church, where our children are going or our grandchildren are attending, I believe we have a God-given responsibility to stand, to say something. And so, we do call this out, and I think it's just going to, and I really encourage you to sit and listen to this story that Tom Stallings tells, and how time after time after time, church leader after church leader, instead of protecting the innocent, they protect the perpetrator. And then at the very end, the church goes and doesn't go after the perpetrator. They spend $60 million. Is it your tithing money? I don't know. To go after the families of the abused children. It's a heartbreaking story. It's important for people to know. This isn't about pointing fingers. This is about demanding justice. We have a God-given. When you understand how severe the problems are in this state, in our backyard, and sadly in our church, I cannot say that it's not systemic. There are systemic problems. And if you will have the courage to sit and to watch this, I think you will understand and start to see why we are so concerned and why we are calling out the church's law firm and so many different things we see that are protecting perpetrators and not the most vulnerable amongst us. And like Christ said, it's better that better a millstone hung around the necks of one of these perpetrators and they're drowned the depths of the sea than to offend one of these little ones. We should go to war for one child. But when it's time after time after time, 50 kids, there is no excuse. So, Alexi, anything you want to say? Well, but then we will think Brett and start the show.
Sure. No, Brett, anything you wanted to share about why this matters to you and why it's important now? I mean, we are talking about something here that was a 2018 conviction, or I'm sorry, 2018 settlement. So this is, by all intents, an old news story. Why is this important to you now?
Because nothing's changed. The kids are still getting abused. There was abuse going on in my ward when my wife was primary president. She was not allowed to talk about it. She was not allowed to warn other parents. And when she did, she got disciplined from the church for doing that. We weren't allowed to talk about it, and it's still a very much big problem. And I mean, you link this back. This Michael Jensen's first charges happened when he was 13 years old in the Provo Edgemont stake. What would have happened if it would have been corrected and notified, and everyone in the church would have known, hey, this person's not safe to be around other children? What would have happened? You would have saved 50 kids from being abused. But the problem is, and then we're not even talking about the real problem. Like, where did he learn this? Kids don't just go out and abuse people. He must have been a victim himself. And then it all links back to like, why is this not stopping? It's because it's not being talked about and brought into the light. Everyone wants to sweep everything under the rug and pretend like everything's perfect, and it's not.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you say that because I posted your reel on social media and I was surprised by the number of people who were offended by it, said, "Oh, this is not an appropriate place to bring this up." I said, where would be the appropriate place if not at a podium where people have ears to hear?
Hundreds of comments saying that exact same thing, and I'm like, this is not okay for the abuse victims. And that's what I've tried to do on my social media, is like, when people come at abuse victims, they just get blocked. They don't get a voice, because the people who do that silence the victims, and that needs to stop. The victims need to be able to speak. They need to be able to speak in safety, and somebody needs to stop them, and it needs to be the men of the church and the men around here that need to put up those walls and say, no, we're going to allow these victims to speak. Because right now, it's only the women. Watch that video. It's all women in there who are speaking and who are defending and who are recording and making sure. And it's all the men who are trying to stop them from speaking out.
That's the men that are singing to drown them out.
Yeah. Well, Brett, we appreciate you. I'm going to share two points along those notes, and we'll start the rest of the program. The first is, for those who've been following and understand ritual abuse, I'm going to ask you to watch this story through that lens. Where the family's from, patterns, and what you will see is we are sharing one version of a story, but what I can tell you is there is a whole nother version of the story that is not told, that those who understand the patterns that we have been unveiling and unmasking for the past several years, I hope we'll be able to see that. And then as far as, the comment about is it appropriate or not for them to stand up at the sacrament meeting, I'm not here to judge that. I'm not here to speak to that. What I'm here to say is, I think, had those women been listened to, had their leadership listened, had anyone listened, how many children could have not been abused? Their own children might not have been abused if someone would have warned them. And so to me, it was a final last plea of desperation. And again, before people sit in their seats of judgment, watch this video, listen to what happened to these poor women and their lives that have been wrecked, of 50 families that will never be the same again, all in order to protect one vile perpetrator and his family. So with that being said, thank you, Brett. Thank you, Alexia. And And thank you to all of you who are willing to stand and fight and to make a difference and not be silent in the face of evil.
So, Tom, just wanted to give you a chance to update us. Your show was filmed over a year ago now, but with the recent video surfacing from Sacrament meeting, any updates you wanted to give us or
And
context?
who were the girls? What happened there?
Yeah, do you want to give us any information about that video? A little bit of background?
Yes, that was it was a very interesting day. It's a day that we had scheduled a press conference, and we had a conference here. Myself, my wife, 4 of the other moms, which 2 of the moms were in the video. They were assigned to go to the church and speak in sacrament and try to warn all the other families, about their children. And which you saw the video, it did that. As the church did that, they attacked the ladies. They started singing out loud to try to over volume them, and they didn't want to hear the truth. But they were children in the audience, had been abused by Michael Jensen, so they heard that too, and and they were holding on to their parents, but their parents knew it too, but they still didn't do anything about it, sadly. But that was a big day. We did a hike that day. Mark with Sam Young, Protect Every Child, and we held a press conference. And what was interesting about the press conference that evening, the bishop and the stake president, they had the bishop's 2 sons, 2 of his sons, who were actually abused by Michael Jensen, come to that meeting and record it and report back to him to see what was being said. Which I stopped the press conference in the middle of that when I saw them sitting there recording. And I walked up to them and I told them, I said, I'm sorry you guys are here and I'm sorry you have to go through this. But, let your dad and state president know that you're welcome to have a copy of it. That way you don't have to sit here and endure this, to hear all the different stories. But a lot has happened since then. The church, I don't know if you are aware of it, I'm sure you are, but I hope so. But they've tried to sue their own insurance company to get back that $38 million that they spent, settling claims here. As I told you in our story, that the judge here forced us to make a settlement with the church, and the judge was friends with at least 6 of the local lawyers who was representing local members, and he wanted a settlement. Every day he told us during the trial that you got to settle this case. You got to settle this case, but we refused to.
And what was interesting was that same week that our show came out, there was a verdict. Do you want to just share a little bit about what happened later that week or later that month?
Yes, the insurance company and the verdict on that, they ruled against the church because the evidence, the insureds showed it plainly, and their paperwork and stuff showed that there was evidence to show that the church and leaders knew about this predator for 6 years and didn't do anything about it. And they also, put the predator in my home where he abused my children when the police were looking for him for 5 months. Didn't warn us, didn't warn anybody in the community. They were just hiding him from the police. And that's how my children got sexually abused. And he also raped 3 other girls during that time, which one was on at a youth meeting there at the church. He raped her in the parking lot. And we were able to get her to the police. And finally, we were able to get him arrested for her rape. And that's what got him finally put in jail. And but the church is they've still appealed it. They're still appealing it again up to the Supreme Court, trying to get their tithing their money back from their own insurance. But their own insurance has shown overwhelming evidence that they were guilty of what they were charged with and what they settled out of court here in West Virginia.
So would you say that Sacrament meeting was a turning point in the case?
Well, was it a fast and testimony meeting, or what was it?
It was a fast and testimony meeting, and the moms went up to bear their testimony and warn the community, the members, say, hey, you need to talk to your children. This was actually after the trial had already happened. But what had happened, the church lawyers told all the local leaders that they lied to them, telling them that, We didn't settle. They all lost their case, and the judge threw it out, and nothing's there. He lied to them. So that's what the members were thinking happened, because that's what the church lawyers went back and told the local leaders, and that's what the local leaders shared with all the members.
Wow.
And they tried to keep us from talking about it. They shut down Nightline, made them change their whole story to make it look like it was just the parents' fault and not the church. There were several other shows and podcasts that they threatened lawsuits to get taken down. But those two brave moms, they stood up for everybody, and they wanted to make it aware that they were leaders there in that congregation that knew about this sexual predator for 6 years. The church paid to move 3 or 4 of the local leaders away from West Virginia because they were getting the members, once these moms spoke out and stuff started coming out, they were, didn't want to support these leaders anymore. So the church moved them. They moved the stake president to Texas. They moved 2 of the high councilmen out to Utah and Idaho. And so that's what they did. But there's still Matt Whitcomb, who was on the high council. He and the state presidents want to put the abuser in our home. They made him, now he's the state patriarch here.
Really?
It makes me sick to think this man's, putting his hands, giving these young children and stuff blessings, and after he protected his own grandchildren, keep from the abuser coming to his house to see them and put them in my house along with the state president. But they advanced them up in the ranks of the church.
It's just crazy.
Instead of doing anything against them, I went to the state president, the new one that was assigned after we put a lot of, pressure on him. They finally came and released him. And we wouldn't have nothing to talk with me about. He said, "Nope, I'm not talking about anything with you. I'll do anything if you need help, but I'm not discussing anybody else with you." And I said, "I guess that's what you've been instructed to do." He said, "It is. That's what Salt Lake has told me to do." So they wouldn't take action against none of these members. Just kept promoting them up into higher ranking into the church, and where they're over many congregations and over the stake. And it's sad. If you do something wrong, you're supposed to repent from it, and you're supposed to get forgiveness, and you're supposed to be held accountable for that. And they're not doing it. They've never done that, and I doubt if they ever will.
Yeah. Well, Tom, we're just very thankful for you. It's been really interesting to see the problem we have with the men in this culture, especially in the culture of the church, who just want to put their head in the sand and not question, not be involved, or defend the church instead of defending children. And I just have the utmost respect and love for you as being the type of man, or a sheepdog, but I like to think of it as someone who will protect the children and the sheep from the wolves. We need men like that. We need more sheepdogs out there who are on guard to the wolves that are hiding and infesting this country and within our church, and be willing to put their neck on the line, because we have this culture of men who it's just honestly, I'm disgusted by it. This beta cupcake male Christian. It's just so disgusting, and I just have the utmost respect for you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. The church has it in their handbook of instructions that every stake president, the bishops get. They're not allowed to go to the police. It tells them to call the helpline, which calls straight into Kirk and McConkie, their law firm. Their first concern is protect the well-being of the church before they are protecting children. And that's sad. Every leader throughout this world in the LDS church has that handbook, and it tells them specifically, do not call the police. You have to call the helpline. Yeah. And the first thing they do is protect the church.
Yeah. And when you're being stonewalled there and you have women speaking up in fast testimony meeting, and then you hear people in response to that saying this isn't the proper place to talk about it, it makes you wonder, where is the proper place? So
absolutely. Well, they wouldn't even talk with me when I tried to. And as you see, one lady who was recording it with her phone the state high council secretary, the secretary to the state president, knocked her down and took her phone.
Wow.
Assaulted her. You can see in the video, he knocks her forward and takes her phone from her. And, the church has no respect for children or women. And it's sad, they something really needs done about it.
Well,
Well,
we're
you're
glad
doing something.
yeah, we're glad for you. And you're a good example for the rest of our viewers of what we can do.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Tom.
thank you, Tom, and God bless.
Well, God bless you all, and thanks for everything you're doing.
All right. We'll bring you back for another show soon. So be well.
Okay.
All right.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And welcome to We're the People, where we shine a light on the truth, no matter how hard it is to hear, because we believe it's the only way to protect the innocent and defend our liberty. I'm Jason Preston alongside my co-host Alexia, and today we have a heavy but crucial conversation ahead.
Over the past few months, we've interviewed several victims and have discovered a disturbing pattern that's emerged. Too often, perpetrators are protected while the victims are silenced. We've seen a fire chief and a judge in Box Elder prey on the innocent, allegedly. We've seen Brent Bassett set free in Fruit Heights after allegedly abusing 50 children victims. We've watched David Hamblin escape justice time and again, while not a single perpetrator listed in his daughter's victim statements has been investigated. And we've heard Mary Beth's heartbreaking story of teachers, church leaders, bishops, journalists who have all failed her. It's a thread running through these stories, including some right here in our own church community. Alexander Schultenson once said, "You can resolve to live your life with integrity. Let your credo be this: let the lie come into the world, let it even triumph, but not through me." And that's why we're here today, because staying silent isn't an option when the truth can save lives. This isn't about tearing down a church that we love. It's about facing the reality that even in a faith built on goodness, there can be cracks where predators hide and victims who get overlooked. Our goal is to take a stand for those who have been hurt, to expose what's been broken so it can be fixed, and to ensure our kids and families are safe. We're not here to point fingers, but for the sake of blame, we're here to protect and heal. So stick with us. This is a tough one, but let's get into it.
Okay. So we've done a lot of, I would say, heavy-hitting shows, from exposing political corruption, smart cities, exposing the ritualistic abuse. And I would say there's probably, I don't know if there's another show that's had us as concerned about filming as this one, which is the reason, especially for myself, I've been a little bit more scripted. This will be a very hard-hitting show. It is something we're very concerned about, and we've put a lot of prayer into how we deliver this, because we are dealing with some very sensitive topics here, and our goal is not to shake anyone's faith. Our goal is to protect children. Our goal is to prevent and stop corruption, no matter where it is. I'm going to ask you to make sure you stick with us to the end of this, because I will tell you, as this story unfolds, this incredible story from Tom Stallings, as it finally comes to the end, you will be left with your head spinning. This is a wild story. It is unbelievable. And I'm going to let Tom tell that story. But before we jump into this, I'm going to ask you to please go to our website, wearethepeople.org. This is the type of show that we know has a very high probability of getting our channel taken down.
Or worse.
Or worse, yes, which is why we're being so careful in how we present this. And we're not attacking, but just explaining and showing from, again, what these survivors are seeing. So please go to our website, subscribe, so that even if our channels get taken down, we can still get you content if you value this. This show is brought to you by friend Gary at Global Remarketing in Orem. Appreciate him and for all the support he's been to us. And let's go ahead and jump into this. I would like to start by introducing Tyler. Tyler's the one who actually brought us to this story. Tyler, like a lot of you, we have some very amazing, loyal supporters and fans. Tyler, welcome to the show. You want to, and we have him protected. that's one of the things that is important to us. We know this fight is a risk. Everyone that people are, it's a risk. And so we always want to protect people and make sure that they feel comfortable sharing. So Tyler, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me and for having Tom as well. I'm just an average guy that I took an interest in Tom's story when I saw it. And the more I learned, the more I picked apart the details, the more unbelievable it got. Just like you said, it's a story that I believe needs to be told. I've been watching your show for a while now, and I've been inspired by the willingness and the risks that you guys take in telling these stories. And just thank you for doing that. Tom's story really impacted me. The details broke my heart first, and then I saw the betrayal, and that enraged me. And then I got to know Tom and was inspired to share his experience. So I reached out to both of you, and I put together a little presentation, and here we are.
Awesome. And Tom from West Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here. How are you?
Doing good, thank you.
Well, it has been absolutely amazing to visit you, a few times over the last couple of weeks and get to know your story. I think it's just, I know we talk in this show and when we had our rally about sheepdogs and wolves and how wolves prey on sheep, and is the role of the sheepdog to protect the sheep and against the wolves. And I just think, you are the true example of a sheepdog. So
Tom's going to share a story with us today that some of you actually might be familiar with. You might have seen pieces of this story several years back. What you haven't heard is all of the details of the story, which some of the information has been protected with how damning some of the information is. So what we're going to share with you today is another perspective of a story that's been covered with the likes of ABC News, Dateline, and some pretty gripping exposés. But what we're going to share with you today is going to show you a whole new angle that has been suppressed up until now.
So Tom, tell us how you got here.
Well, I got here I wanted to share a story.
Yeah.
Share the truth about something, to open the light on it, to help other victims. And I wanted the opportunity to, if it could save somebody from going through what I went through and others went through, I wanted to be able to do that. But also wanted to, hopefully it would empower somebody where they could be able to speak out and not have to live with the tragedy that they've been through.
So Tom, you have obviously an incredible story. Would you mind sharing with our audience a little about your childhood and what has made Tom?
Yes, I'll start off with I was abused at a very young age. Started at 4 years old from my mother and my stepfather. And rough life, a lot of beatings, in and out of foster homes. I finally got into a good foster home at 17. But at 17, once I turned 18, I had to be out of the foster home. So I joined the military. I became an alcoholic, just trying to deal with the childhood from the abuse. I relied on drugs, alcohol, trying to cope with that. But one thing about it, I always had God on my side, and I knew that. And to this day, I feel that. I always felt his presence with me because I knew there was something getting me through each day. Because they were days that I didn't know if I would even wake up the next day or not. But it took a DUI to get me to open my eyes. After having a DUI, I decided I need to straighten up. So I prayed to Heavenly Father. And I asked him, I said, Heavenly Father, if you could just send me someone, please, that I could love, someone that would love me for who I am, someone that, we could grow together. And the blessing, oh my gosh, the blessing came from God quickly. I was dating a couple girls off and on, and I felt like I had a calling from God there because they were atheists, and the only way we would go out is if they let me read scriptures with them. So I kind of thought I was on a mission with God, but he brought the girl to me to bring the mission to me. And that's where I met my wife, Juliet. And to this day, I'll never forget the first moment I saw her. I was actually on a date with someone else when I saw her, and I had to go and find out who she was. And I got nowhere with her. She told me she dates nobody but members. And I quickly thought, well, I know I'm a member of every bar in this town, so I might have a chance here. But then she told me she's a member of the LDS church. And I said, I've heard that. Then immediately I thought, she's my next person I got to save. But she saved me. She gave me life. She gave me hope. She gave me a purpose to want to live. And she stood by me. She helped me get over my cravings for alcohol. And we just had a beautiful life. We were blessed with 4 children, which children was something I never wanted because I was scared. Because I never wanted a child to grow up in childhood like I did. And I didn't think there was a world where it don't happen. So I never wanted any, but seeing her at church and seeing her around children and the primary, and I saw her in nursery, I kept falling in love more. And I thought, right there, I would love to have children with her. Because I know she would be an angel of a mom. And she's been that and everything, even more.
So at what point were you married with Juliet?
We got married in August of 1993.
1993.
Yes.
So we're going to fast forward now about 10 years to 2011.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us what life looked like for you at this time?
Oh, life at that point was it was amazing. I was working. I was a state rehabilitation counselor working with individuals with disabilities, with addictions, with challenges. Marriage life was wonderful. We had 4 beautiful boys. And I just got to watch them grow, which I don't know, I felt like I was on cloud 9 because all my prayers have been answered. And I was loving the church, enjoying my callings. I love my callings. I served as the Elders Quorum president. I served as a temple worker for 7 years. But the calling that just really reached out and took my heart was Addiction Recovery Challenge program that the church has. They have a 12-step program. And I knew that God had that calling for me. And I started doing that calling, and I loved it so much that the church saw that, and they put me in charge of over 4 different states. I was part of Virginia, part of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. And what I did there, I would go in and train individuals in the wards in each state on how to run the 12-step program. And I got a little bit in trouble with the church here because I added the challenges on the end. It's actually a 12-step program, addiction recovery. But I didn't like that word addiction. To me, it was like a curse word to me. Because a lot of the challenges, a lot of the addictions, and a lot of the challenges they had was not drugs. We had pornography, we had overeating, we had anger. There were so many different challenges that were there. And so that's why I changed the challenges, but it was just wonderful.
Basically, you join the church, change your life, great blessing, night and day, overcome, and then you're helping other people. And honestly, that's the thing I love about the gospel is when you live, the principle of the gospel, it's hard not to see your life flourish.
So what happened next after this?
With Michael Jensen.
With Michael Jensen. Well, in 2012, Michael Jensen, a young man from a prominent family, his grandfather's in the General Authority here in Salt Lake City, and he came home from his mission early, and we all know usually missions are 2 years long, but he came home after 8 months. And usually when that happens, you think something's had to happen for to come home from your mission early. But the bishop, stake president, and Michael Jensen himself, they cleared that up quickly by saying that he came home early because he hurt his back on his mission, and he'll be going back on his mission once his back heals. So that quietened everything down because gossip in the church can get going if you have a return missionary home. And that's what we all thought. But boy, were we wrong.
So tell us what happened with Michael Jensen.
And then, because Michael Jensen, he was from a very prominent family in the church, high up. His family, like I say, is in the general authority. His grandfather is. His parents are high in the stake. And we just, he come to live with us because that they were in the process of moving. So he first moved in with Matt Wickham, was staying with him. But Matt Wickham came to me, said after, an assignment from the stake president, asking could he stay with us because Matt Wickham's family, daughter and grandchildren were coming to stay. And he said he didn't have room for Michael Jensen to be there. And so they called me, and Matt Wickham came over to the house and said, hey, I've talked to the stake president, and he thinks this would be a good idea. If Michael Jensen lives with you all for a couple of weeks, he'd be really good with your son. My oldest son at the time had a chastity problem, and the stake president was working with him so to get him ready for his mission. But he had some steps that he had to overcome, and he had to go through before that can happen. And he said that Michael Jensen would be a good mentor for him. And so I thought, sure, you know how it is in the church. If you're asked to help somebody, or if you know you can help somebody, of course you want to.
So, all right. So now let's go back to your story. You've got him. He's home from his mission because he's got a back injury. Church leadership asked you if you could help look after him or give him a place to stay while his back's getting better until he goes back on his mission. What happens next?
The 2 weeks that he was supposed to stay ended up being almost 4 months because Matt Wickham's daughter ended up staying, and Matt Wickham said that he just didn't have room for him. So we said, sure, we can stay until he gets better, because we were thinking in September, because he moved in with us at the end of March, that he'd be going back on his mission. So we said, okay, we can go ahead and keep him. But we did have an incident happen. We have, he was living with us, and I was in the bedroom, and I heard my son scream out, and I heard my wife yell and tell him to go to his bedroom. And so I came out of the bedroom to ask what had happened. And she said that my second oldest son had punched Michael Jensen in the face. And Michael Jensen was standing there, and he had a goose egg on his eye. And my son was only 11 years old at the time. So he must have hit him pretty hefty. And I asked what happened, and they said we were just horseplay and wrestling. So I went in to talk to my son, and he had told me, he says, Dad, while we were wrestling, he grabbed me by my privates. And I said, he grabbed you by your privates? And he said, yes. And he said, it just didn't feel right, Dad. He said, so I punched him to get him to let go. So I immediately went back in the living room, and I set Michael down on the couch, and my wife was there too. I said, Michael, what happened? And he said, we were wrestling, we were horseplaying, and I accidentally hit him, grabbed him there. I'm so sorry, it was an accident. Again, there's no red flags for me to think anything or to know anything. So immediately I told him, I said, well, there's no more wrestling. No more wrestling at all. Doesn't happen again. That way prevent it from happening.
Good.
Because if I'd had just a glimpse of a red flag, I'd have known to do something. But that night at the stake center, I saw President Grow, because Michael Jensen, he had to go every week and meet with the stake president. And my oldest son, who was friends with him, would drive him there. So after the meeting, I saw President Grow in the hallway. And I walked up, and we were talking. And he said, well, how's it going with Michael there? I said, well, it's going pretty good. I said, well, you saw my son punched him in the eye. And he laughed. He said, yeah. He said, I saw that. I said, yeah, they were wrestling. And he said Michael grabbed him by his privates, so he punched him. He laughed it off. He said, oh, boys will be boys. Yeah, what really changed things was after about 2.5 months, 3 months after he was with us, I received a message on Facebook from a mom. And she had asked me, was Michael Jensen living with us? And I said, yes. And I asked her why. And she said, can you call me? So she gave me her cell phone number. I called her, and she said, well, he's not safe to be around kids. He hurt my children. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, I can't tell you right now because I'm on my way on vacation, and my kids are in the vehicle, and I don't want them to hear me. but when I get back from vacation, I'll tell you. And I asked when she's going to come back, and she said she'd be back in a week. So a week came back, and I didn't hear from Helen. So I called Helen, and she said, well, I'm just now pulling into my driveway at home, and can you come over? So I went over to her house, and she had her children, her sister, take her children upstairs to put them to bed. And so that's when the bombshell hit. She had told me that Michael Jensen had molested her children, and gave great detail. It was just awful, the things that she said he had done. And I was just sitting there with my chin sitting on my... He locked them up in cabinets, would force them to give oral sex before he would let them out of the cabinet. He had a hole drilled in the side of the cabinet to where he would put his penis inside the hole, and if you know what they had to do, and if they didn't do that, he'd keep them locked up in there. And he had his brother was also out there watching this happen. His younger brother, who was only 3.5 years old at the time, was seeing all this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was sick to my stomach. And I told Ellen, I said, did you go to the police? She says, no, Tom, I couldn't. I said, why couldn't you go? She said, nobody believed me. I said, what do you mean nobody believed you? She told me, she said, I told my husband. We went to Bishop Fishel, to our bishop, and and told Bishop Fishel, and that was who our bishop was. And said that Bishop Fishel told him that he was going to talk with Michael and talk to Michael's family, parents about it, and get back to her. But she said that they never got back to him, but she saw Bishop Fishel in church that Sunday and asked did he ever have a chance to talk to him. And he called him into his office. He said, yeah, let me talk to you and your husband. And he said, well, I did. I talked to Michael. Michael explained to it that he's going through his dad's pornography videos. This is a high councilman with pornography videos. Bishop Fishel did bring him in to his office and talk to Michael. And Michael said that it's not true. He denied it. He said what they did, they walked in on him going through his dad's videos. His dad wanted to go through his porn videos and get rid of them, to go through which ones were good, which ones were bad.
This is Michael Jensen's father,
Michael Jensen's
who is
father.
this high counselor, state high counselor.
Yes, has a porn collection.
And then this isn't like jostling anybody.
No.
This is not like red flags.
Yes, that's exactly what I would say, and that's exactly what I said. It just is mind-blowing. But she said that Bishop Fishel told him that then he prayed about it. Said that he prayed about it, and God told him that Michael Jensen and the family was telling him the truth, that the kids were lying.
So the bishop says he prayed about it, and that according to him, Michael Jensen was telling the truth, and the kids that were molested were lying.
Correct.
The biggest drug that they found in tap water, do you know what it is?
Fluoride.
Birth control.
What?
Birth control is the highest toxic compound found in tap water.
Wow.
So boys are consuming this. You got to think about testosterone dumping. Of course, because you're getting estrogen. You're getting birth control. You know what I'm saying? Like, no wonder our hormones are all jacked up.
Yeah. You're showering in it. You're drinking it. It's in your food. It's in your bread.
Yes.
Your pasta.
And pasta and
everywhere.
everything. And
Holy
everything.
crap. Even your fruits, they're watering it.
Yes. Fruits and everything.
Vegetables.
I mean, you can't even drink a bottle of water in plastic because of the nanoplastics and the microplastics.
Crazy.
It's just, they're setting us up for failure.
So I don't know if you guys saw the show we did on masculinity and the falling testosterone levels, and actually how Utah is actually one of the highest states for low testosterone. Testosterone matters. Men need testosterone. People who don't have testosterone are more susceptible to being ruled over. They don't fight back. They don't push back. When you look at the corruption in our state, when we look at the corruption, what's happened to our children, we need men whose testosterone hasn't been taken from them, who are not being pumped with these pharmaceuticals, whether they're taking them directly or not. It's in the water, because what people don't understand is when people take these pharmaceuticals and you take it into your body, it doesn't stop there. When you go to the bathroom, that water that goes into the system, into the ground, and it is now back in your drinking water. Please make sure you have a system Again, there's three systems we promote at Century. One is for whole houses, which is what I recommend the most. Is what you're bathing in, is what you're showering in, is what you're cooking in, or something just under the sink. And then emergency solution for when the lights go out to make sure that you have clean water, because when that time comes, when the lights go out, if there's an earthquake, when something happens, your food is great, but if you need a gallon a day. If you don't have a solution, you're going to be in trouble. So check those out on their website, and thank you for everything you guys do. Okay, and, what's next?
Yep.
And I'm going to tell you guys, this story will just at every level blow your mind at levels. By the time we get to the end of this thing, your head will be spinning. Go on. What happened next?
Then after that, Helen and her husband, Helen wanted to go to the police anyway at the time. I said, okay. And, but the husband wouldn't let her do it, because she said, the bishop's prayed about it. He's got an answer from God. God knows the facts. So our children are they saw the porn movies, and they got carried away with their imagination. So Helen was furious, and that's when their trouble started. Their separation began. But Helen didn't go to the police at all at that time, because she just didn't think anybody would believe her.
So go ahead, baby. How did you respond? What did you do next?
Well, I told her she needed to go to the police, and I called the police the very next day.
While he was still living in your house?
Yes, which he was kicked out because I went home after that. And when I got home, I immediately told my wife, and I brought Michael Jensen into the living room, and I told him, I said, me and you're going on a drive. And I put him in my car. And we went to the top of the mountain. There's a wide place there you could pull over. And I got out, and I got him out, and I said, we're going to talk. And I told him exactly what I was told, and I said, I want to know the truth. And he cried, swore up and down it was not true. And I told him, I said, Michael, I said, kids don't make that stuff up. Not at all. Yeah. And he said, okay, there is something that happened. I said, what? He said, well, they walked in on me going through my dad's porn videos. And this was before, not that Bishop Official told me that, but so he went through his porn videos, and that was the story. He was sticking with it, and he wouldn't budge, but he was in tears and begging. He said, oh, Brother Stallings, I promise you I'd never do nothing like that. It was just the videos. The kids walked in. They asked me some questions. I explained to them what was going on. That's what happened. So we went back to the house, and I told him, I said, you're out of here. Yeah. And I said, you better not have touched my children. And I asked him, and he says, no, I didn't. And so I told my wife what was going on. So it was late at night when this happened. So I told him he wasn't allowed to come out of the room that night. And then I set the baby monitor there at his door. That way I can hear if he came out of the room or not. And the next morning I kicked him out of there. Good. He was there no longer. And then I called Helen to see if she's contacted the police yet, and she hadn't. But so I did. And they said that she would need to come and make a report. And to the officer, I called Helen and gave her the officer's name, who she would need to talk to, and she called the state police and filed a report then.
Good.
So then you went to the stake president following that?
Yes, to the stake president and to Bishop Official.
So next in the story is the police follow up with your wife, correct?
Yes, they come knocking on the door. My wife answers the door. Okay. This was about a week after.
And what happened then?
A week after, I was on a police detail because I was a deputy reserve, and I helped the police department. And my wife would call me, and she says, Tom, you need to come home. And I says, everything okay? Because I was scared, because she usually never calls me and tells me, hey, you need to come home. She says, you need to come home now. She said, but everything's okay, but you need to come home. So I immediately left, went home. And when I got home, Chris Jensen was there, the father. Michael Jensen was there. They were standing out in my driveway. And Chris Jensen immediately come up, oh, how you doing, Brother Stallings? His hand out to shake my hand and everything. And he started talking, and I still don't know what's going on yet. And we're standing there talking, and my wife comes out. She says, Chris, have you told him yet? And he ignored her like she didn't even say anything. And he kept talking, and she said it again. I said, Chris, she's talking to you. And I said, what is she talking about? And she says, if you don't tell him, I'm going to tell him myself. And he had told me, he said, well, Michael got picked up today and had to go in front of the judge. He's being accused of hurting some children. And immediately I thought, well, it's Helen's, it's got to be Helen's kids. And but I said, who was it? And he wouldn't answer me. And I asked him again. He said, oh, I really can't say. But my wife said, if you don't tell him, I'm going to tell him myself. So my wife's a firecracker.
I like her already.
Yes. And so he told me, he gave me the name of the other family. And it felt like a sledgehammer hit me in the heart. Because now that's two families, two names that I'm being hit with. And I'm sitting there looking at this boy and looking at his dad, and I'm just in disbelief. And the dad says, well, I want to give you some money, and you can keep Michael here and I'll pay you.
You kidding me?
Yeah. And I told him, I said, I don't want your money. And I said, I don't want your son either. And I said, you need to get his stuff and you need to get out of here. And he never was at our house again from that point on. And
but you gotta look at this. Unbeknownst to Tom and his family, he just finally realizes, after how long had he been at your house at this point?
Almost 4 months.
So a predator has been living in Tom's home for 4 months. And unbeknownst, right? And the thing about wolves in sheep's clothing is they don't look like wolves. They look like sheep, right? And unless someone who knows better warns you, or unless you've been attacked by one, you don't know who they are. They don't look or act like wolves on the surface. They're extremely good at blending in. And Michael Jensen was good at blending in. Yeah, so you got Tom here. He finally recognizes there is a wolf in his presence, and he does what any responsible parent would do. He kicks him out of his house, and he begins sounding the alarm to any and all who will listen. Tom, if you wouldn't mind just sharing kind of what you did in response to finding out and having certainty now that there was a pattern with this kid. What did you do next?
Well, the police already knew, so I immediately went to my church leaders. I went to the stake president, because I thought, you all don't know what you're doing, what's going on with this guy. Because, I knew the stake president. I served with him through my calling, for over 7 years. And I loved the man. I thought, he's an awesome man, good, holy man. I went to the bishop. I went to the leaders. I told them, I said, now you got to talk to other parents. You got to, anybody that he stayed with, he's been around, you really got to talk to him. But they wouldn't do it. And it really bugged me. It got under my skin because I didn't understand why they didn't just jump on it immediately. But then I asked him, I said, why won't you do it? He said, well, there's confidentiality. He hasn't been charged with anything yet because he still hasn't been arrested. And he said, we just can't do that. So I didn't take that kindly. So what I did, my wife did, we on Facebook, we started posting it. And we messaged every family that we could think of that he might have stayed with that had children. And oh my goodness, and started talking to them. And then the walls just start coming down. Parent after parent, yes, he hurt our children, he hurt our children. And what the sad thing about it was, we had several families that the moms wanted to go to police, but the husbands wouldn't let them. And I didn't understand that. I thought, how can a father not want to go to the police if their children are abused? But they were more worried about their statue in the church. They didn't want people to know that their kids were hurt. They wanted to hide it. And they said, we'll get our kids counseling, but we don't want no one to know. And what I did, I took all those names and gave them to the prosecuting attorney and to the state police. And we're looking at over 50 children.
50 children.
Over 50 children. And I was just blown away. And I went back to the leaders, and, I'd tell them what I've done, and they didn't like that. They didn't like that I was out doing that. Actually, the stake president took his hand and hit down on the desk like that. He says, Tom, you don't have the priesthood authority to be doing that. I said, I'm not doing it under any authority under the church. I'm doing it as a human being, as a father, as someone that should know. These people must know. They need to know what's going on, because these children are out there. If they're abused, they're suffering. Well, you need to bring them to me. Don't be telling them to go to the police and stuff. And but I tried to get him to help, and he wouldn't help. He'd tell me he would call the parents, and a day or two would go by, I'd find out never called the parents at all. And all he was doing was reporting it back to higher ups, and instead of doing anything to help anybody.
Wow.
What kind of higher ups were these?
He would contact general authorities out here in Salt Lake City, Curtin McConkie, with a hotline. They have a hotline that they call. They're supposed to report any abuse or anything to, but he would call and tell them about it.
But no action.
No action whatsoever.
This is hard to accept, hard to understand that people could be willing to not stand and fight and defend these kids, but where are the police so far in all this?
The police are still doing an investigation. They did come and knock on the door. They knocked on the door of my house, and my wife answered the door, and they asked if Michael Jensen there. And she told him no, but she can get him back there because he had just left with my son to go to the stake center. And my wife went and got him, and they went to the court. The police did take him into court, and he pleaded not guilty to just to one family, because at this time there was only one family, and everybody's denying, but nobody's taking him to the police. And we have the stake leaders, we have the parents. His parents know, and no one's taking him to the police. He's hiding. And his parents' home was up for a short sale at that time because they had to file bankruptcy. The father was in and out, going to Iraq and back, and the mom was like trying to sell things, get things organized to get out of there. So Michael Jensen was staying with other people, some of his other friends, and he was also staying come to find out, he was staying at the house that they lived in, just hiding there. But the police couldn't find him.
So the kid's hiding from the police, and no one in the community, the church they're all running cover for him, basically.
Yes.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, you've got this predator on the loose, potentially accumulating more victims, right? And so the police hands are tied until they, get the investigation, and it's just a matter of time before the predator strikes again. And that's exactly what happened.
Yes.
So what happened next?
Sadly, what happened then, a young lady that was like my daughter to me, I've known their family for over 8 years, and the father of that family was excommunicated, so he couldn't, perform any of the priesthood duties. I was their home teachers. I gave them their school blessings. I gave them a blessing if they were sick, and they were like children, my own children to me. And she was friends with Michael Jensen also, because they all grew up in the young men programs. Right. But I warned her to stay away from him, and I actually even told her what he was accused of. But she had ran into him at a church activity at the church, and some way he persuaded her outside, and he had raped her in a van.
Jeez.
There in the church parking lot. And sadly, the shape that poor girl was in, she had bite marks over 90% of her body. And
bite marks?
Bite marks where he had bit her, and he was very vicious, getting very violent. With, each thing was getting more violent. So it's hard telling what this, predator was going to end up doing. He could end up killing somebody eventually.
Especially without any repercussions.
Yes. So he's just running free, hurting people. And so what it was, she called my wife and told my wife about it, what had happened. And my wife told me. So immediately I told her, I said, listen, you need to. She told me, told me about the bruises and everything. I said, you need to have your mom take pictures of your bruises, of your injuries. And she did. And I called the state police. I told them what happened. They gave me the next day a time to bring her in. So the next day she came over that night, spent the night with us. And my wife took her into the state police the next day, and gave them the pictures to show for the evidence, and gave a statement. And that's when they were getting ready to get a warrant for his arrest. to arrest him for the rape of her, but they still couldn't find him. So this young lady had told me that he'd mentioned about going to out west, and that he was staying some at his old house, and she had told me that he had told her that the stake president had bought a ticket and was going to be sending him out west to his uncle's house on a Greyhound bus later that week. So I was flipping out. I thought, no, we can't let this guy escape and get out of here. So I called the police again. So they know me well. So I called them and I told them, I said, I could tell you exactly where he's at. And they said, will you show us? Can we follow you? And so on my way there, I drove by there to see if any lights or anything might have been on in the house. And lo and behold, I saw him walk by the window. So I knew he was there. So I got to the police. The police came and arrested him. And thank God he's been in jail ever since then. But he was arrested on the rape charges of the young lady. And that's actually what got him put in jail.
So he's arrested. He's
Yes.
charged. He's convicted. Is this where things end?
Oh, no. It's just beginning. Yeah, the story's just beginning.
Yeah, now it becomes an effort to try to make sense of how this happened, right? So you can tell Tom is a detective at heart, right? He's a bounty hunter. He's doing the job that the police should be doing, that the neighbors should be doing. He's doing it himself. He's a one-man wrecking crew to these predators. So, unfortunately, this story is about to get really, really disturbing because we're going to go back in time now, and we're going to go back to the point where Tom discovers that Michael Jensen has a documented history of allegations that began with an arrest on felony sexual assault back in 2004.
Okay, so this is all 2012.
Yes.
Well, this stuff's going on now. So now you find out that it didn't just start with you. We were just this goes back 2004.
Yes. And we're going to discover who knew what and when, or at least should have.
Okay, so what happened in 2004 then?
Okay, so we're going to go and we're going to check out the slides here. And we're going to begin in 2004 in December when Michael Jensen assaults two female classmates in Provo.
How old is he here?
He's 13 years old.
Wow.
So 13, he already is assaulting two girls, and it's documented.
It's documented. Yeah, these are news articles. This is all documented after the fact, right? Because he's a juvenile, so his juvenile record is sealed for the most part. But we're able to find out a lot of information. So basically, here's the story. In 2004, a 13-year-old Michael Jensen was arrested at his middle school and charged with 2 felony counts of child sexual abuse for allegedly pinning 2 female classmates, a 12 and 13-year-old girls, against a wall and fondling them inappropriately without their consent. That is sexual assault. So a plea agreement was reached in the case, which resulted in the charges being reduced to 2 misdemeanor counts of lewdness involving a child. But, as the story would turn out, there are allegations that Michael Jensen's prominent grandfather, Blaine Jensen, intervened in that juvenile case, and that's what allowed him to get those reduced misdemeanor charges.
I can't help but think 2004 in Provo, at the same time, you have the Hamlin victims in the same exact area going through their own abuse.
Oh yeah, you want to know something even crazier? They were in the Edgemont stake.
Oh wow.
So yeah, same neighborhood, same area, yeah. Anyway, at this point, we know for a fact in 2004 that Michael Jensen's prominent church leader grandfather, his parents, Chris and Sandra Lee Jensen, and his local bishop, you'll see in the lower corner there, Dale Swenson, they were all aware of Michael Jensen's guilty plea because they were all present during his court proceedings. This wasn't a minor school infraction. The police showed up at his middle school and arrested him on felony sexual assault.
So their parents know and their grandfather know who they're dealing with.
Exactly.
Okay, what happens next?
All right. So now we're going to move on to some other things that they knew, or should have known at least, which was a risk sexual behavioral risk assessment that Michael Jensen took in 2004 in relation to these charges. And as we go through this slide, we'll just read the highlighted portions, but there's more to it. He denied knowing the meaning and of consent and denied knowing how age makes a difference in giving consent for sexual activity. So this, just to reiterate, this is a sexual behavioral risk assessment done by a licensed psychotherapist.
Court ordered?
Court ordered, yes. Next, based on interview and assessment results, Michael displays significant thinking errors regarding sexuality and children and appears to be confused about children's views regarding sexuality. He believes some children engage in sexual activity because they are naturally curious about sex. Michael's offenses are based primarily on opportunity. That is, he does not go to great lengths to seek out his victims, but will offend if given the opportunity.
I think the key there is he will do it if the opportunity is there.
Exactly.
It's like a major red flag.
And finally, Michael needs to be supervised with any female, including his sisters. That's going to figure prominently later as well. At this time, until his therapist considers that his risk is reduced. So in summary, according to this risk assessment done by a professional, Michael Jensen doesn't understand consent regarding sexual activity. He is highly likely to reoffend if given the opportunity. He has significant thinking errors regarding sexuality. He needs supervision around peer-aged females, including his sisters. And finally, we don't have it here, but it is essential that Michael's father participate in treatment, which we would later learn doesn't happen. So basically the emphasis here is who knew what and when, or at least should have known. This was the point in the timeline where any future victim can point to and say, this predator should have been on people's radar, including parents and church leaders, and at a minimum, these individuals knew of his elevated risk to reoffend if given the opportunity, just based on the one felony incident and this psychological assessment. There was no excuse. Parents, church leaders had the minimum responsibility of keeping a close eye on this kid and preventing him from being around other children. All of those victims that you're about to hear about over the next 7 years did not need to be victimized. Their lives did not need to be shattered. It was totally unnecessary. Instead, what happened was Jensen's history was hidden and he was protected. And that enabled him to become a much more prolific and proficient predator.
So who knew at this point? At least his mother and father, Chris and Sandra Lee Jensen. And we can assume possibly his grandfather as well?
Yeah, most likely the grandfather, because he was, again, alleged to have intervened to get those felony charges reduced to misdemeanor charges. So, yes.
His bishop knew too.
Oh, and his
bishop. So it would have also been his church records.
It should have been.
It should have been.
It should have been marked, but it wasn't.
So, again, we talk about who should have known. The parents, ultimately, were the first line of defense, right? They could have easily protected others, especially given the fact of what you're about to hear. When they moved to West Virginia, they are immediately placed into leadership positions of trust within their new community. So Sandra Lee Jensen, within months of arriving in West Virginia, is called as the Relief Society president in the Mill Creek ward in the Martinsburg, West Virginia stake. She knows about her son's sexual history. Does she do anything to warn ward members, Tom?
No, not at all.
In fact, just the opposite, right?
The opposite.
What does she do instead of warning about her predator son?
She sets him up babysitting.
She's enabling.
Yeah, she enabled him. She put a bulletin on the bulletin board. If anybody needs a babysitter, Michael will be glad to babysit for you. You don't even have to pay him if you don't want to.
Jeez.
Pimping out these poor kids.
He's taking his payment out of the kids.
Yeah, we even have some emails here of
this.
These are emails from Sandra Lee Jensen to ward members offering babysitting services, including at her home with her predator son. So you can see the second one there, and we'll just read the last section here. Your kids are welcome to come over for movie night and Xbox with Michael. End quote.
No adult supervision.
Absolutely.
Apparently not.
None.
All right, so this is where it's getting really uncomfortable. But we're going to move to the next slide. And this is just the most prominent cases. This is a timeline of just a few of the most prominent cases of abuse that occurred. As Tom indicated earlier, there were over 50 individuals who were victimized by Michael Jensen over the course of the next 7 years. But this is going to help to illustrate who allegedly knew what and when. And in the end of this, you're going to hear a lot of leaders making a lot of excuses about having no idea that Michael Jensen was a sexual predator. So we're just going to present this evidence, and we're going to let the audience decide if that's an acceptable excuse. And then it begs the question is, what is the difference between being innocently unaware to the next phase, which is willful ignorance, to the next phase, which is negligence, to criminal negligence, and then finally to criminal intentional deception. And so you're going to have to decide where each individual falls on this spectrum. But let's begin with the first individual on our list here, which is RJ, and it's actually age 7, not 5 I have on there, a little mistake. So this is the first sign of a major problem in the Jensen home that becomes at least limitedly public knowledge. Tom, can you share a little bit what you know about this particular case?
This came out in the hearings, right?
Correct.
Jay, so at the primary, yes, what it came out, they had an activity. You know, they have activities every like Tuesday or Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And, you know, everybody's at the ward, kids are in and out. Well, the primary teacher got called to the nursery because she was told that the young lady who is Michael Jensen's sister is in there with all of her clothes off and touching herself.
What?
On a table. And someone needs to come in there and help to get her to stop.
This is RJ is his sister?
Yes, that's one of his sisters.
At 7 years old?
Yes.
Publicly masturbating in the church building?
In the church building, in the nursery room.
Now, I just want to reiterate, there's no evidence to suggest that Michael was responsible for this, but why this is significant is it shows a clear sign that there's issues within the home.
The home. I mean, because some of the stuff in the victim statements talk about training young kids to do that stuff, and that seems much more of a red flag than even that. Okay, so that's RJ. What was next?
So next we have PC, and PC is age 4, and this is the first child sexual abuse victim outside of the family that is identified of being babysat by Michael Jensen. And what's significant about this story is that this child, it was immediately known that something happened. Do you know the details of that one?
Yes. He was assigned to babysitter. The mom and dad went out of town, so they got Michael to babysit to stay at their house and to babysit the young girl and also her older brother. The older brother had a baseball game, so he wasn't at home. But when he come back home, come to find out the young girl was upset. And she had told her brother what had happened. So that Michael Jensen had touched her, made him touch her, himself, and she was just very upset. So he called the parents, and the parents left, but they didn't get home till the next morning. And again, they didn't press charges. Wish they would have, because it could have been stopped there. But Michael again said, all I did was spank her. And that is true, because she had bruises, handprints, bruises on her from being spanked. But he had also molested her too.
Jeez.
So again, who knows what and when? This next slide also is significant because this is the first evidence that is found that the Stake High Council had been made aware of the abuse. Tom, do you know anything about this situation?
Yes, I do. Stake President Mont, that's Mont Palmer there, He was a high councilman. His child was abused too, but we won't go into detail about it. But they had a high council meeting discussing about the Jensen family, Michael's abuse, the husband's abuse toward the wife, and Mont was assigned to mentor the dad, Chris Jensen, and to try to be a positive example to him. Try to go out on date nights with his wife, do double dates to show how you're supposed to treat your wife, and to do things like that.
So they've assigned a babysitter to the father, but not to the son.
Yes.
Well, sort of. Okay, now this next slide here. Help me understand this one, Tom.
These are the people the High Council discussed that Mom Palmer had told myself, Spring, Helen, and Alice, you see there, about the stake president, about the High Council discussing the abuse with the Jensen family. Tony Nagel also told the investigator and myself, and Steve Groves, the stake president, told me about it also. That's what that slide is.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we've got Chris Jensen, who has a babysitter himself, and he has some allegations of impropriety. And what happens to him in the church at this time?
Well, he gets in trouble a little bit. He had an affair on his wife and everything. Usually you'd think you'd get excommunicated for that. He gets a high councilman calling so they can said it would help him stay closer to God. And he would be able to stay on track more. But, he also has addictions too. That he came through the addiction recovery program. He had pornography, which he admitted that. And he had addiction with bestiality and young teenage girls.
Is this the same one who confronted you when you were working in the addiction recovery?
No, this is Michael Jensen's dad.
Yeah, this is the dad.
So,
the son of the General Authority.
Yes.
So did I hear that right? Did you say underage girls, pornography, and bestiality?
Yeah, 18-year-old girls, teen porn, he said he liked, and bestiality.
And he's promoted to be on the High Council.
Correct.
Unbelievable.
And the father doesn't warn anyone either. I guess I can kind of understand a mother wanting to protect her son, but another opportunity here for the father to warn, but nothing?
Yes. Michael came also to the addiction recovery program because they sent him to there to prepare for his mission. But his dad never allowed him to talk. He never spoke one time. He would just come and sit quiet. So he wasn't even allowed to meet with me and counsel at all, too.
Yeah.
The dad wanted to keep him silent.
What's next?
All right, yeah, we're going to have to just start hitting these pretty fast because we just have so many.
Yeah, just go through them.
Okay, so the next slide we have JM, age 14, and that's a movie theater incident. This one's important to touch on because in 2007, Michael Jensen, was accused of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl, also a member of the ward, in the hallway of a movie theater in Martinsburg, West Virginia. According to court records, Jensen's mother allegedly knew about the theater incident and asked the girl if she was quote-unquote okay and if there was quote-unquote a problem. No criminal charges were filed in the incident. Also, according to information given in the court documents by Blaine Jensen, who was Michael Jensen's older brother by a couple years, Blaine had to physically remove his brother from off of this victim. The victim testified in court that she did not consent to the incident, and local leadership knew about the incident because in court documents is also disclosed that JM disclosed her assault to the bishop, Matt Whitcomb. Is that correct, Tom? Do I have anything off there?
No, that's correct. And in West Virginia, you're a mandatory reporter.
Which is not the case in Utah, correct? Priest or clergy penitence law?
No, that's a different situation altogether.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So, in the next situation, you're gonna hear from two mothers in this next situation that cover 4 different victims, and this is a powerful testimony that explains exactly what they experienced. So let's roll this.
In 2005, the Jensen family moved away from the church's home state of Utah, eventually settling in the local Martinsburg, West Virginia LDS community, known as a ward.
Within each ward, you have a bishop, There's very much an expectation that the bishop is acting under the inspiration of God.
He officiates the meetings, and he is the one that you would go to if you had any concerns or problems in your personal life or in your church callings.
She's given her life to her children, and she's certainly given her life to me.
The families we spoke to say the Jensens quickly made a name for themselves.
How would you characterize just how influential the Jensen family is within the Mormon Church?
Very influential. And they presented themselves that way also.
Michael's father volunteered as a high priest. Michael's mother, Sandra Lee, was president of the Relief Society, one of the highest female positions in the ward. It provides support for local families.
Many bishops would consult with their Relief Society president when making decisions on behalf of the ward or their congregation.
Springs says in 2007, her marriage was in trouble.
So I had gone to the bishop. He asked if he could share my information with Sandra Lee, and I agreed to that. She approached me and said, you know, if you ever need to get away or you guys want to go out on a date night, she said Michael's available to babysit.
But Springs says there was something about Michael Sandra Lee didn't tell her. In 2004, while living in Utah, Michael was arrested for allegedly groping 2 girls under 14. He ultimately admitted to 2 reduced counts of misdemeanor lewdness with children. He was placed on probation and ordered by the court to attend sexual appropriateness class.
Did you have any idea that he had prior allegations of sexual assault?
I had no idea. I trusted Sandra Lee. I trusted her judgment.
Based on that, in November of 2007, Springs says she asked Michael to babysit. When she returned home that night, her sons and the babysitter seemed fine.
He made the comment of, your boys are really cool.
What Spring didn't know was that something horrific had happened that night. But like so many victims of sexual abuse, it took years for them to come forward. And in that time, Michael kept babysitting children of the ward, including in 2008, Helen's 2 sons.
Sandra Lee told me that she had heard I was looking for a babysitter and that Michael Jensen, her son, would be available to do it.
Helen says Sandra Lee and Michael watched her boys multiple times until...
I was going to put my son on the bus. He asked if he was going to Michael's house today, and I said yes. And he just was crying. He doesn't want to go over there. Michael's mean. And I just said to him, I said, how is he mean? And he goes, Mommy, he makes me suck his privates. And it was just that, what did you just say to me?
Helen says she confronted Sandra Lee.
I told her what my son said. And she just sort of looks at me. She's not surprised. She's not in denial. There's just sort of stoic. And she says, I'll talk to Michael about it and get back to you.
In court testimony, Sandra Lee says Helen complained about Michael's babysitting and mentioned sex abuse, but nothing specific. She says Michael told her the boys merely walked in on him going to the bathroom. Helen testified that she and her husband met with Bishop Don Fischel.
I told him what he had said about Michael Jensen, what he made him do.
She also testified that when she followed up later with the bishop, he told her nothing like that happened.
He thinks that my son walked in on a video that Michael was watching, and that he was counseling Michael on pornography. And he says to me, Michael Jensen is a good kid from a good family.
Bishop Fischel testified that he never had any of those conversations with Helen. Instead, in a statement to ABC News, Fischel said Helen's husband came to him alone to say his sons were acting strange after Jensen babysat them. Fischel says there was no mention of physical or sexual abuse. But in court testimony, Helen's now ex-husband corroborated her account that they both met with Bishop Fischel and that they did tell him of their children's claims of sexual assault. Bishop Fischel would testify that Michael told him the children had walked in on him as he watched pornography. Fischel said that he did not go to authorities in 2008 because he didn't believe there had been any abuse, and added he'd been fooled by Michael, as we now know what really happened.
My son's word against Michael Jensen's word, and not even my bishop, my Relief Society president, none of these people are supporting me. The only thing that I could think of for my son was, I don't want to go to the police because I have to put him through this questioning.
Reaction?
I'm glad it was getting some coverage, at least in national mainstream media, but it just begs the questions of how this can go on so long with so many victims and not one person could go ahead and report this to someone who will listen.
Yeah, so here's a few slides of the details. We don't need to go over them too much other than to just point out exactly what happened to these children. But we'll get to this next slide here, which is...
Where there was one with disability.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one I have a hard time with. I don't know why. You know, I find it... I think one of the sick things about pedophiles and these sick people that I hear about as we talk to victims is they like young people and they like abusing people with Down syndrome.
Handicap.
Yes, and I think it's because, you know, I've had a sister that's Down syndrome. She lived with us, grew up as you know, and they're so pure and innocent and and very childlike, and I think some of these sick people love destroying innocence of people, whether it's kids or people with Down syndrome. And I don't know, when I see and hear, you know, that's one that just, I mean, it all infuriates me, but that one especially, just because they can't defend themselves and they can't communicate to people.
Exactly. So you touched on this earlier, and what stood out to me from that video was the bishop's willful ignorance, blind ignorance, if you can call it that. And what's important and why that was significant is because there are mandatory reporting laws. And if you read the mandatory reporting laws, there is a loophole in this loophole in the law. So I'll just read this real quick. So, member of the clergy who has reasonable cause to suspect that a child is neglected or abused. That is the loophole right there. That reasonable cause can be interpreted very loosely by anyone. And so that creates the incentive for, I didn't see anything, I didn't suspect anything, I didn't know anything, because the minute that you accept a responsibility for knowledge of abuse, you are mandated to report.
In other words, it no longer gets handled in church up to the church, to Kirk and McConkie. It now goes outside of that closed circuit to the police.
Exactly.
So all this stuff, well, I didn't know, and I believed the perpetrator, not the victim, and I think the victim was lying, all protects the clergy from having to report.
Right. And if you talk to women, and why I bring this up is my wife brought this up the other day. She said, you know what's funny, as you share that with me, I think back to the time when I went to my bishop and tried to disclose the abuse that I had experienced. And the bishop immediately shut her down and says, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. You are forgiven of any... My wife was concerned about feelings of guilt, right, for this abusive experience that she had. That's generally what happens, is people who are abused feel guilty. Sadly, that's how it works. And so this bishop, because, and this is my interpretation, because he didn't want to be culpable for having to report any abuse, he didn't want to hear the details that my wife really wanted to share, that she wanted to get off her chest. And I think that is a perverse incentive.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to the main timeline here. And we've got we have CH, who's age 3, and another victim of being babysat by Michael Jensen. And now we're going to get into an email that was sent from Sandra Lee to Matt Whitcomb when things were going wrong in her home. And we're going to play a little video along with this one as well. Here's the email.
The very next year, it was Sandra Lee who was reporting her own son's behavior to another bishop, writing in an email that she was really concerned about Michael and asking him to find someone who could take him in because, quote, we cannot risk our other children.
She intimated that she was worried about her other children.
Absolutely. Sandra Lee would say in testimony that the risk she was referring to was Michael's bad attitude and behavior, making him a poor role model. The following year, his mother and father would both later testify they kicked Michael out of their home after his 12-year-old sister accused him of lying on top of her and kissing her.
You know, as any mother would, she wanted to protect her children, but she didn't protect the other children of the ward.
Meanwhile, Michael continued living with other ward families, continuing to advance normally in the church, ordained as an elder and selected for a mission.
Again, just the fact. They knew. They knew who this kid was.
Yes. And even after this, we have another very interesting, sad, tragic situation, which was alluded to in that video, which was the KJ incident, age 12. And this is another different sister of Michael Jensen. And I'll just give the quick rundown. In the summer of 2010 there, an 18-year-old Michael Jensen enters his 12-year-old sister's bedroom where she is attempting to take a nap. Jensen climbs onto his sister's bed, lies on top of her, and begins sexually assaulting her, kissing her on her lips. According to this girl's deposition, the assault lasted for 15 to 20 minutes before their father, Chris Jensen, walks in on the assault. It was at this point that Michael Jensen got kicked out of his home for good. Well, sort of. Because there was a short period of time that Michael Jensen spent a few days living in the Jensen's backyard in a tent and was only allowed in the home when his parents were present. And there was also another incident where his parents were no longer willing to risk their own children, and so they turned a blind eye to what may happen to others and began pawning him off on other families in the ward. Now, another situation that's interesting about this is Michael Jensen is preparing to go on a mission. Okay, he's just months away from leaving to go on a mission. And his current bishop is Don Fischel. And when this incident happens, instead of contacting Don Fischel, the current bishop, about their daughter being sexually assaulted by Michael, who do the parents turn to, Tom?
They turn to another bishop, Chris Vincent, who was of another bishop. And this bishop didn't report either. Now, this is going to make you sick. What this bishop did. This bishop gave Michael a key to the church.
Oh my God.
And told him that he could live there in the church, sleep there during the night, but during the daytime that he needs to be out, go, walk around at the park or whatever he needs to do. The bishop called Relief Society and had them bring meals into him. But you know how many kids, how many parents go to the ward building during the week and have meetings and their kids just run and play. And this predator's in that building sleeping, staying
With a
there.
bed, yeah, that's
So up. It's sickening to think that. And then they made him stay in the tent. Anyway, he wasn't allowed to come in. He had to stay at the door. Somebody had to walk him to the bathroom, or they'd hand him his plate and his food. But then they pawned him off on other families too.
Yeah, we've got the Winburns, we've got the Kiogans, and we've got the Browns. Do any of those families have small children, Tom?
The Browns did.
Okay.
Yes.
At this age, if he's getting ready for a mission, he's, 19 years old?
Correct.
So he's now an adult, and he's still not on a registered sex offender list of any sort?
Yep, still being hidden and protected. All right. So the next, we'll just quickly go through these. We have AB, age 5, assaulted. And then here we have Bishop Fischel recommending Michael Jensen for his mission just a couple months later in June. Well, this is April, so during this whole thing. But a couple months later, he leaves in June of 2011 to go on his mission. So next in the timeline, we have January 22nd, where a mother named Spring learns about the abuse of her 2 children. And this is the first woman in that video that we've already watched. And what I want to point out here is what her natural reaction was to finding out that her children were abused is the following day, on January 23rd, she calls the bishop. Thankfully, the bishop doesn't answer. And so her next call is to the police. And that is probably the best decision for her children and community.
Why do you say that? I mean, obviously, but go ahead. Why do you say that?
Well, I'll let Tom, because Tom shared this with me just before we started, of what this mother disclosed to Tom had the bishop answered.
Yeah, if the bishop would have answered, she wouldn't have called the police. I know that for a fact because Chris Vincent, who was her bishop at the time, is very convincing, the cover-up. And he had already known about it because that's who they took the daughter to, that the sister about Michael Jensen being on top of. He's the one that gave Michael Jensen a key to live in the church for a week. So he wasn't going to do anything. So God's divine intervention is definitely in there, to make sure he didn't answer that phone.
So he didn't answer. She goes to the police and...
Let's watch a quick video.
What no one told the Martinsburg ward members was that Michael Jensen already had 2 prior felony charges for sexual assault in Utah before his family moved there. Jensen was on a Mormon mission in Arizona in 2012 when Spring discovered what he'd done to her sons.
I broke down. Nothing really prepares you for that. And so I just completely broke down. And I left the room and just went into the bathroom and just cried.
Spring says when her bishop didn't answer, her next call was to the West Virginia State Police.
I tried to get in touch with the bishop, but I thank God because he wasn't available. And so the state police, when you look at it from a different viewpoint of it not being a sin and it being a crime, then I needed to put it into their hands.
State troopers started an investigation, and church officials brought Jensen back from his mission to participate. But they didn't tell anyone in Martinsburg why he'd been called back.
Now we're going to do another video. So this next clip is going to reveal even more evidence that the cover-up continued even after the police were contacted.
Spring made contact with West Virginia State Trooper Corporal Ryan Eschbaum.
I spoke with Spring to inform me that her boys came forward the night prior and told her husband that they were sexually abused by a babysitter. My gut told me there were probably more.
Corporal Eschbaum testified that he called Sandra Lee and a different bishop trying to locate Michael, who was away on a religious mission in Arizona.
I wanted him sent back as quickly as I could.
Sandra Lee and local church officials later testified that they didn't know why Michael was under investigation.
So there you have it. Corporal Eschbaum says that he wants Michael Jensen back to speak with him. And this is where things get interesting, because the very next day, Spring, after talking to the police, she does finally connect with Bishop Vincent. And then Bishop Vincent decides to call the helpline.
Kirk and McConkie.
And what's the purpose of this helpline?
So yeah, the church established the helpline back in 1995 with the help of their law firm, Curtin McConkie. The helpline was established for bishops and for other church leaders that had sensitive questions regarding sexual abuse. They were kind of advised to call the helpline before deciding whether or not to report the sexual abuse to police or child welfare services. Now, the church's position, their official position, is that it condemns sexual abuse and, quote, helping the victim is of first concern, end quote. And I think we can all agree with that, right? This is a very commendable position. Now, going a step further, we'll read from the handbook. The church's official handbook of instructions for leaders states that the first responsibility of the church is to help those who have been abused and to protect those who may be vulnerable to future abuse. How does the church do this? Since its founding, the core family concepts and doctrine of the church have provided this support. Additionally, a helpline was established in 1995 to provide bishops with immediate access to professional counselors to guide them in protecting abuse victims. And as far as the abuse helpline goes, the church's published goals state that it is, number one, to assist victims and help protect them from further abuse. Number two, help protect potential victims. And number three, to comply with legal requirements for reporting abuse. Now,
So 1, 2, 3. 1, help the victims. 2, help potential future victims. And 3, report to the police.
comply with legal requirements for reporting abuse. You have to, there's a nuance there.
Okay, that's actually...
There's a nuance there. Okay, again, these goals are commendable.
Yeah,
right?
those are all good things.
But only when their application focuses on the victim as the top priority.
Not the perpetrator.
Not the perpetrator, not the liability of the church leader, not the liability of the institution. The victim is the top priority. This is why so many have legitimately argued that the LDS Church and or Curtin and McConkie, their interpretation of legal compliance has been in many instances detrimental to the welfare and protection of current and future victims. And here's the kicker. Helpline calls are not immediately transferred to the legal authorities so that they can take action. Instead, calls are funneled to the LDS Church's legal counsel, Curtin and McConkie.
How do you know this? You're saying this. How do we know this, though?
This is documented.
Okay.
This is documented. We're about to find, you ask anyone. And within the church handbooks, bishops and other leaders are advised when they have questions regarding sexual abuse, they are advised to call the helpline.
So that was since 95. When was this? Do you know when the Strengthening Members, what is it? Strengthening Membership Committee was founded? Wasn't it around that same time? When the Glenn Pace memo came out, that was addressed to the Strengthening Members Committee.
Correct. And that was in 1990. So at minimum 1990.
Okay.
All right. So again, the question needs to be asked, whose interests are the top priority? We've got Bishop Chris Vincent here. He's made a call to the helpline in response to Spring coming forward with her children's allegations. We have no idea exactly what is discussed between Chris Vincent, the bishop, and Curtin and McConkie, the lawyers he consults with on the other end of the helpline. But we have a basic idea based on a leaked document. It's called the Helpline Protocol document. And this is what was used in the past for people who were manning the helpline. And we're going to highlight that right here. Okay, so this is a leaked document. And what we're going to do, this was an official document that was obtained by Tom's lawyers, and it sheds a little more light on how these calls to the abuse helpline were and still are likely handled by Curtin and McConkie. Okay, so we're going to go through and just read some highlighted portions here. And the first thing that stands out to me when I read this is high-risk cases. And I have to ask myself, high risk to who? By the end of this document, I think we're going to answer that question. All right, next we've got, if any of the following questions are answered yes, immediately transfer the call to legal counsel. Okay, and then you have a bunch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. First one is, does the offense happen on church property? Next, is it a church-sponsored activity where the abuse occurs? Next, is the abuse by a church leader or youth leader who used their church position to accomplish the abuse? Next, is the perpetrator employed by the church? Next, is there an awareness of previous child sexual abuse? And finally, is the abuser or alleged abuser currently a missionary, even if the abuse occurred prior to his or her mission? If yes, transfer the call to Bob. Okay, so there's even a line here that fits perfectly with the situation that we're dealing with here. A missionary. Okay? Next of note, abuse helpline workers should instruct priesthood leaders to encourage an interested person to report the abuse. Individuals who may report include the victim, the perpetrator, or other third parties who know about the abuse, neighbors, parents of victims, spouse or family of the perpetrator, etc. Do you know what's conspicuously absent from that? Is the bishop, the one who's calling the helpline, who is the frontline defender, who is finding out this information first. Very interesting. Next, we've got, if a priesthood leader recommends that a perpetrator report the abuse to civil authorities, he should also recommend to the perpetrator that he or she should consider obtaining legal counsel. What? We're going to give advice to the alleged perpetrator? And finally, abuse helpline personnel should never advise a priesthood leader to report abuse. Counsel of this nature should only come from legal counsel.
I don't know. I don't like that.
So again, what is conspicuously absent from this document is any mention of prioritizing the needs of current and potential victims. Okay? There's advice to help and protect the liability of the church. I can see advice to help and protect the liability of the church leader. There's even advice to protect the alleged perpetrators. Where is the advice and counsel to protect current and future victims?
Yeah. Jeez.
Again, high-risk cases for who? All right, and to just drive home the point, so the same law firm that created the LDS Church, their abuse and reporting system in 1995, that's Curtin and McConkie, is the same law firm that defends it in abuse-related lawsuits, including the ones filed by the victims of Michael Jensen.
Wait, run that by me again about so the defendants of the victims of Michael Jensen's case, when they were, Kirk McConkie was going up against the victims?
Correct. They were assisting the defendants, the defendant of this case, and in future civil lawsuits, the multiple defendants of this case that we're going to hear about later. So are you seeing the conflict of interest that is quite obvious here?
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm missing something.
No. Protecting institutional liability should never take precedence over protecting current and potential victims of sexual abuse. If there were two easy policy changes that the church could make to demonstrate the sincerity of their stated goals, it would be first to eliminate the helpline's inherent conflict of interest of claiming to represent the best interests of victims while simultaneously representing the opposing side. And the second would be to eliminate the priest-penitent privilege laws that protect perpetrator confessions and mandate all church leaders contact legal authorities immediately upon the discovery of any allegations of sexual abuse.
Absolutely.
Let the professionals do their job.
I think some of those crimes could have been prevented if people would have done their civic duty and reported to us what was going on. From my standpoint, church officials don't conduct child abuse investigations. We do.
So back to the story. It's now 2012. Michael Jensen is on his mission in Arizona. Police are involved, and they're trying to get him back to West Virginia.
Correct. So here, the next data point is February 23rd, 2012. Michael Jensen is flown back to West Virginia. Now, if you'll notice the timeline, that's a full month after the police have been contacted. Tom, do you have any understanding of why it took so long for the church to get Michael Jensen sent home?
Yeah, they didn't get back to the state police at all. The bishop, the stake president, they didn't get back to him to give him his address or anyway how to get a hold of him. They kept telling the police that they would, but they never did.
So now he's finally home from his mission. He can finally sit and talk with the police?
No. No, they come up with a different plan. Instead of taking him to the police or contacting the police and say, hey, Michael's home, that's when they moved him in with Matt Wickham and myself. But they come up with a plan. Here is they have a special meeting. They have the stake president, Steve Grow, Michael Jensen, Sandra Lee Jensen, and then they bring in Don Rye, who is a public defender in the county. And they bring him in, and they come up with this story to tell everybody. And they come up with a lie about having a hurt back, hurt it on a bicycle. And they told him not to contact the police. You didn't have to.
So the stake presidents and this group come up with a lie that they're going to feed to the members.
Correct.
And now it's all come full circle from the beginning of your story, where you now have this returned missionary in your home only for the reason that he's got a back issue and he can't stay at the Whitaker's house because of company that he has.
Yes, correct.
And they're hiding him out at your house while he's continuing to rack up body counts.
Correct.
Before we jump into that, there's a video here that I want to watch that documents this alleged secret meeting.
Church officials later testified that they didn't know why Michael was under investigation. His mother and a bishop His mother and a bishop also testified that after Michael did return home from his mission, there was a meeting on February 25th where they were instructed not to discuss the case with anyone. The church, however, denied to ABC News that such a meeting even occurred.
So are the police notified of his return at this point?
No. They did not let the police know anything.
So he can't be brought in for questioning. They're in this secret meeting concocting this lie.
Correct.
Prior to any police involvement, which is the sole reason he came home to begin with.
Correct.
Wow.
So how do they find out that he's home?
Is this a conspiracy? I mean, that's...
They found out he was home when my wife had called and told me that the police had knocked on the door looking for him. Spring had actually found... She saw his address on the bulletin board where they put up there where people could write him on his mission. So Spring saw that and took that to the police, and they were able to get the area president on the phone and say, hey, you need to send him home. Wow. But they sent him home without anybody knowing about it.
Not even his mom knew that he was coming home. Michael Jensen calls from Dulles Airport, which is 90 minutes away, and she finds out at 1 a.m. in the morning. And again, it's an unbelievable story, right? That just keeps getting more and more unbelievable.
This is what's reported.
This is what's reported, right? And so she calls the mission president, and guess what? The mission president doesn't know anything. No one knows anything in this whole story.
Yeah, which sounds like a load of garbage.
Right.
It means they're just protecting themselves and claiming ignorance.
Right. So again, you got to revisit this just a little bit to drive home how devastating this must be for Tom to realize that all this stuff was known prior to Michael Jensen being invited, being directed to live with him at the behest of the stake president and High Counselor Matt Whitcomb.
So things have to be getting close to getting resolved. He's home. Now the police know he's here. He can get in for questioning. So are we coming to the end of this story now?
Well, we're rejoining the initial, because Tom's already talked about Michael Jensen has been convicted. Right now we're just revisiting and we're getting back to the beginning again. But there's a few more details that we need to discover that Tom didn't discover until much later.
Okay.
So Tom is finding all this stuff out after the fact, and it becomes even more devastating with each piece of information that he uncovers. And again, Michael Jensen at this point has not been arrested, but we know the story, how it ends, is that he eventually gets arrested, charged, and convicted, right? But one of the more tragic elements of that is that when he finally got arrested and all these victims began coming forward, instead of rallying around the victims, the cover-up by the leadership continued. They rallied around the perpetrator and his family instead. And this is where it gets so sad, but a video will do it justice. So let's break to the video.
State troopers started an investigation, and church officials brought Jensen back from his mission to participate. But they didn't tell anyone in Martinsburg why he'd been called back. And several families allowed Jensen to stay at their homes in the months prior to his arrest in mid-2013.
I found out that Michael abused other children during the criminal trial process. During that time, other parents started to come forward and started to tell their story to the state prosecutor. And actually, the person representing Michael's defense attorney, was a member of the high priesthood. And he was defending Michael. I felt betrayed. That they would rally around this individual, Michael Jensen, who is a serial pedophile, and they rallied around him. And there was no protection and no support for my children or for any of the other children or for the families.
So, Tom, do you want to just describe the significance of who defended Michael Jensen at his criminal trial?
Yeah, it was Don Rye. He was a public defender, so he volunteered to do it. He wanted to do it. He took it over to do it. And it was hard to see your high councilman, you know what I mean? Because I testified in that trial. And to be questioned by him and him to question my answers, are you sure about that? And I said, absolutely. And it was just, it was sickening. And I can't even imagine, because I sat there and I looked, and Michael Jensen's side where he was sitting at, some of his family was there, some of their friends were there sitting on that side, but there was no one sitting over there with Spring and her parents, you know, with Helen and them. You know, they had no support at all.
Wow.
So Michael Jensen, in February of 2013, was convicted of sexual abuse. And in July, he was sentenced 35 to 75 years. But even then, as we discussed earlier, it wasn't the end. One element of justice was finally served, but it was just the beginning of the discovery of betrayal for the victims and their families. I'm going to let Tom cover the next couple slides because it relates to him personally. Now, the most devastating thing is I discover when Michael Jensen is finally sentenced, that story.
I found out because I was in the kitchen with my wife, and it was after the trial, and we were talking about Michael Jensen when he got sentenced to prison. I don't want to cry, I'm sorry. My youngest son had heard us talking and heard me say that he was going to prison and that he would never be out of prison to get out again. And my youngest son had came through the hallway and was crying and ran up to me. Daddy, you're not going to jail. I said, what do you mean, son? Daddy's not going to jail. Michael said that you would go to jail if anyone ever found out that he hurt anybody. And I said, did he hurt you? He said, yes, Daddy, he did. Said that he hurt us, he hurt me, and he hurt my other son, Michael. And for that to hit me like a brick, for us, my wife and I, to find out that way, we knew, we actually knew that they were, but we were told by the head of the LDS Social Services not to pressure them, to let them, when they're ready to tell you, they will. What makes me sick and wants me to strangle myself, and I hope there's no parent ever does what I did. I hope they never do. I'd always told my kids if anyone ever hurt them that I would kill them. And I wish I would have never done that, because that's what prevented my children from coming to me and telling me the truth. And Michael Jensen used that against me. He said, you know, he told him, if you tell your dad, he's going to kill me and he's going to prison, and you're never going to see him again. So, you know, I say to any parent, don't. Even though you want to tell your kids, let them know, hey, I got your back. Someone hurt you, they're going to answer to me. Don't do it. Because it just puts a wedge there, you know, makes them scared because they don't want you to kill them. So Michael Jensen used that because he's a charmer. But he knew that if he'd say that to the kids, he knew what I'd say because he's heard me say it. And it was just heartbreaking. But I come to find out that all 4 of my boys were hurt and were abused. And 2 of them were in the trial. And the reason the other 2 weren't, the judge said there was just too many people in the trial. They needed to break it down, you know, to 2 different trials. And that's why they weren't in it.
So at this point, there was an incredible pressure on Tom from 2 sides. One side was to find the truth and to figure things out. The other side was to bury the truth. And the only way to appease one side was to file lawsuits. And he received incredible pressure to not do that. But it was only after Michael Jensen's arrest that the full extent of this cover-up began to unfold, and Tom I'm sure knew that the only way to get the full truth out was to pressure people into speaking. And so, Tom, would you mind sharing just a little bit of the experience of the lawsuits and how difficult that process was for you?
Yes, well, the lawsuits, one of the moms had approached me and told me, said, hey, I have a list of lawyers, and I think we should go after them, especially the members, the leaders, who didn't report. Because, we had found out a bunch of stuff at that point. And I said, well, let me think about it. I said, yeah, I support you all if that's what you want to do. I said, I'll talk to Juliet to see if that's something that she wants us to do. And because, a lawsuit, I don't know, I just iffy about them. But I knew after I prayed about it, we prayed hard about it, my wife and I prayed together, and we both got the answer. When we got done, I asked her, I said, what was your answer? And she told me, she said it was for us to do it. And I said, that was mine too. So I contacted Tim Kosnoff, and that was one of the lawyers that the mom had. And he was there the next day. He flew in from Washington on the West Coast, Washington there. And he had asked, could I get the families together? And I said, absolutely. So I called all the moms and told them. And they met at my house. The lawyer came. He talked to him. He listened to our stories. He heard the story. And he said, I'd absolutely would be honored to represent you all. And that's where we started it. And it wasn't easy because I even told the stake president, I said, we've got lawyers involved because, these people need held accountable because I went to him, even himself. I said, why didn't you all tell somebody? Why did you all put this guy in my home? I don't understand why you're all not giving us answers. No, don't sue. I've got somebody coming in from Salt Lake City to talk to you. So I told him no. I said, you tell him who's coming from Salt Lake City to stay away from my house because we're not interested in talking to him. So we filed the lawsuit, and it was rough. The lawyers, they would fight you. They took the mother's journals. How the church tells you how important it is to journal, to write things. They went through there and picked things out to make them and brought them up in the trial. We had the one mom about
the church's attorneys. Yeah,
the church's attorneys about a previous marriage. They brought it up just to try to downgrade her, to upset her. And, they didn't care. As long as they upset you like me, they had guys come up and guard me when I had a deposition because they thought I was dangerous. And we got life-threatening, people send threatening information, sent pictures, put in my mailbox, tell me that I was going to die. And
can we see those?
Yes. It has pictures there and told me that.
Leave LDS Church alone, or this will be you.
Yes,
so
that was the letter. That's the letter that was with the pictures.
Oh my gosh.
We'll have to blur these out, but
that's one of where the head was cut off, and that one where the head was half blown off, telling me that I'm next if I don't leave the LDS Church alone.
Jeez.
So I turned it over to the police, and they ended up couldn't do anything about it. Says, we don't know who put them in your mailbox, and they said just be careful and watch out. If you get anything else, let us know. So I contacted the FBI and let them know about it, and they sent an agent out who came out to the house, and they took the originals, and because I told them all about what was going on, what was going out here in Salt Lake City. We had a lawsuit against them, and they actually forwarded those to Salt Lake City to the office there, to the FBI, and said they'd haven't investigated. But to this day, I haven't heard anything from the FBI. So I don't know if they found anything or they didn't. But that's just, death threats. It was just crazy,
Wow.
You would think that his arrest and conviction would bring closure.
Yes.
Especially with that many people coming forward.
Yes, but all we got were threats and people not wanting to talk to us. That's when our Facebook friends went way down because all the members, unfriended us then. They didn't want nothing to do with us because we filed a lawsuit against the church. our own teachers quit coming to see us and everything. And that was heartbreaking. You know, that was another thing, because my wife, she loved the church. She believed it true and true. She was raised in it her whole life. She was born here in Provo, Utah, and she lived it. If anybody lived the gospel, she lived it 100%. And it was just heartbreaking, and it broke my heart to see her break. And it did. It broke them all.
Wow. It's just heartbreaking to hear. It's not just heartbreaking, it's just hard to wrap your head around that. You know, it's, I don't know, I've struggled with this show for a while. And this topic for a while because of hearing things like this. Tyler, what else do you have before we start to wrap up?
Okay, there's just 2 more slides that I want to show in one short video that basically demonstrate the ongoing effort to hide the truth, to minimize criminal behavior, and avoid accountability. And finally, to claim credit where no credit is due. So this first slide here is when the church responded to certain situations. This is their official description of Michael Jensen's Provo incident.
The original one.
The original one, the felony sexual assaults on the classmates.
Okay. I should say the original one that we know of.
Right. We have it being defined as a scuffle with a female classmate and a short verbal reprimand by a judge.
Infuriating.
And then here is the church's official press release responding to the lawsuit. And it says, quote, "When local church leaders in Martinsburg became aware of allegations of abuse, they encouraged the victims and their families to report the matter to police. Local church leaders also reported the incident. The church adamantly denies the allegation that it covered up abuse or otherwise acted negligently. To the contrary, local church leaders were instrumental in reporting this matter to law enforcement authorities, imposing church discipline on the perpetrator, and trying to get needed assistance to the victim families."
Bold-faced lies that could be refuted by multiple parties.
Well, let's just play a video real quick.
With that statement that they wrote being referenced to.
And while Sandra Lee testified that she called the police department and left a message saying Michael had returned home, Eshbaugh says he never got a message from Sandra Lee or from any church official. He says it wasn't until Spring told him on March 4th that he knew.
I found out from Spring that he had returned home in March. Initially, they said they'd help me. The fact of the matter is, though, they weren't all that cooperative.
Initially, they said they'd help me, but the fact of the matter is they weren't all that cooperative. Juxtapose that with the statement that we just read, and it's hard to swallow. It's hard to swallow. Helping the victim is of first concern. Helping protect potential victims. These are all very commendable positions that the church claims. But we need to ensure that it's not just lip service. Actions speak louder than words. We need to remove the conflicts of interest. If you're going to claim to put victims first, actually mean it by your actions. Don't hide behind the legally required minimum while protecting your own liability. Do the right thing.
I think the church's official position is the right one. Helping the victim is the first concern. Help protect potential victims. Remove the conflicts of interest. Remove loopholes for reporting. So, Tom, what are your takeaways looking back? Do you have...
If they would have done that, so many victims wouldn't have been hurt. They didn't do any of that. They didn't protect the victims. They didn't call the police. They didn't let the authorities know anything. They just kept covering up and not reporting. And that's why there's over 50 victims. And that's just ones known.
Do you have any regrets or anything you'd like to share? Any final thoughts?
I'm grateful for you guys. Thank you very much for having me out, but thank you for letting this story be told, because it's important. And if it helps one person to be able to come forward and say, hey, I was abused, or if it helps somebody report abuse, it's worth it to me, because it's hard. It's very hard to talk about, because I'm a victim myself of abuse, of ritual abuse. As a child with my mother and my stepfather, I was taken down into a basement, dressed in a white robe, and put on an altar. The lamb was there, the blood they put on my forehead, the reading from the book. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I remember the people reporting it back, repeating it back. I still have the scars from the cuts where they cut on my body, where they sexually abused me. So that has always been a fire for me. I've always had a heart. I've always wanted to protect everybody. I didn't get to protect my boys. I thought I had them protected. But I made a mistake. I put my faith in leaders of the church who I thought were acting by God.
Tom, you're an absolute hero. We're so thankful for sharing your story. I feel like there's just so much more we could have gotten into in the time we had. But thank you for your story. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for being a role model to so many of our viewers that will hopefully take courage the way you did.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Tyler, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, first off, I'd like to thank Tom for flying all the way out here to share his unbelievable story. It's been an honor getting to know this amazing human being. And thank you both for having him on your show. It's just devastating how many lives were shattered when so many people in positions of trust should have intervened. Michael Jensen is obviously responsible for his actions, but the bulk of his devastation wasn't possible without their protection. I hope that's been made clear. One of the lawyers for the victim said something along the lines of, "They say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to abuse one." Sad, but true. In the LDS Church, we have these well-organized villages called wards and stakes. One of their purposes is to serve and protect our most vulnerable, our children. But these villages only work when the priority is protecting the vulnerable, not when we're trying to protect the reputations and liability of the powerful. And heaven forbid wolves in sheep's clothing infiltrate and become the watchmen. I can't help but wonder if that's what happened in Martinsburg. What some of those so-called shepherds did was unconscionable. From my perspective, the real heroes were those two mothers and Tom. They prioritized the victims over themselves and alerted others, which is what finally put a stop to the predator. And what was their thanks? They were shunned, threatened, and silenced by the very same higher-ups that shielded the abuser. Again, unbelievable.
Alexia?
You've triumphed over so much that no one should ever face in a lifetime. And we're just proud of you and hope you can inspire more people to stand up.
Thank you.
First thing I want to share with our listeners as we wrap up, the reason we know about this is because of someone who reached out to us at abuse@wearethepeople.org. That was Tyler. Went to one of our researchers who went and dug into the story to make sure it was valid. And once we realized it was a valid story, we decided let's pursue it. And again, our threshold for these things is not, and anyone who's been abused, we stand with you and stand for you. But the cases that fit our criteria of stuff we're fighting against is systemic abuse, or institutionalized abuse, where there is multiple people, where there is organizations, where there is laws, where there's, where we are protecting perpetrators. And this is hard for me because, like I said, Alexi and I's lane is always the political lane. We used to say the church stuff because, well, the church with, United Nations, and the church, what they're doing with, with where some of the funding for tithing money is going, and some of these, the Marxism we're starting to see, and, tearing up, that's God's, thing. That's not ours. But when you hear these stories of these kids and as we start to reach out to victims of people who are saying, hey, I went and I reported my abuse to, my bishop, and then it went to their law firm, and the law firm, and that's where I say, what do we have a responsibility there? Do we have a responsibility to defend these kids? And I can't sit by and hear these stories and my church that I belong to and say this is okay. At every level, the bishop failed them. Multiple bishops failed them. The high councilmen failed them. High councilmen were a part of this. The stake president, in fact, West didn't just fail them. They were a part of this. The area authority. You go all the way up to the church, Kirk and McConkie, at every level, there was corruption. 50 kids, including 2 of your kids, 4 of your kids were abused. I don't know how we don't have a role in this, and I don't know what our role. This is, again, I know what I can do. And what we are going to do is we're going to push for legislation to get, at least the state of Utah, to get rid of the priest clergy penitence garbage, because we cannot put the privacy of these people confessing over the abuse of these kids. So this is something we have to think through. Is again, we the people. This is our problem, because, again, we have the judge. We have a system that is failing us in this state. A 3% conviction rate for rape. Meanwhile, we're the 6th highest rape. We're the 6th highest state for rape per capita in the country, at only a 3% conviction rate. There are problems here, and my thinking has never been, let's sit back and let the authorities fix this. This is where we have Tom, a sheepdog. No, we're not going to sit back and wait for the governor to fix this, or the governor to save us, or the president to save us, or the church to save these kids. I believe that we all have a role to play in standing up to this, and to the church, because I know that we've been getting some pushback on the show with Mary Beth, that we don't have a bone to pick with the church, but we have a bone to pick with corruption. And I think it was Alma that talked about cleansing the inner vessel. And I'm not one to speak. We're not ones to speak anywhere. We're not on any high spiritual plane by any stretch of the imagination, nor do we ever want to claim to moral superiority over anybody. But I can tell you that abuse of children is wrong. And I don't have to be a moral Superman to say that's not okay. So, I'd encourage, you people to I don't know, when you write the church, call the church, talk. I don't know what the right thing to do here is. I know what the right thing to do is on the political side, and we're going to fight that fight. But on the church side, and I know the church has made some things, made some changes to fix things, but this was 2012. This is just barely. And the stories I'm hearing from Kirk and Conkey aren't back from 20 years ago. This stuff's recent. So, if the church has a different position on this, if there's something I'm missing, we'd love to have someone come on and show us where we're off base. But I just don't know how we as responsible people, husbands, fathers, can allow this stuff to happen without standing up to it. So anyways, Tyler, thank you for bringing this to our attention, for investing so much in putting this together and helping us lay it out. Tom, God bless you. I can't imagine, being what you've been through. And then after standing up and fighting for these kids, having church's attorneys try to wreck your life. It's just not okay. I don't care. This is not God's way of doing things. So, God bless you. Thank you for coming out here, and thank you for sharing your story with the people of Utah. And to those of you who are going through things, I hope you're learning some lessons. You cannot rely on institutions to save you, or obviously reach out to police, but be talking to people, because we're hearing this too much. So, anyways, we're long on time, but thank you guys for your support. I sure hope we see some change here, because this is just not okay. God bless you guys.